Why do you even need to work and commit any crimes to get into our systems? We'll just publish all this publicly.
Hacking
So
in 2026, just sitting there and paying attention.
just sit around and keep an eye on public forums and you'll get something.
Being able to use a security search engine.
The golden age of cyber crimes. Hello, and welcome to Artificial Developer Intelligence, a weekly conversation show about AI and software development. I'm Shimin Zhang, and with me today are my co-hosts, Dan. He only takes payment in Chuck E. Cheese tokens, Lasky, and Rahul. He's got unlimited patience to listen and understand, Yadav. How are you two gents doing today?
Great.
Hey, how are
Thanks for
you?
asking.
As per usual, we're going to start the show with a couple of news items in the news thread mail, where we're going to talk about Claude Code's new channel functionality, some follow-up on our discussions around how AI is going to affect the popularity of new softwares, and some meta troublespeak.
Then we will be chatting in post-processing about what 81,000 people want from Claude. So that should be pretty interesting.
And then in Vibe Intel, Dan will tell us about his process building the vector memory CLI. I am looking forward to hearing all about it.
All right. And next, we'll be doing a deep dive on an interesting paper called Thinking Fast, Slow, and Artificial.
And then comes my favorite topic, Dan's rant, where Dan's going to rant about something. Keep that as a mystery. Maybe about those Chuck E. Cheese tokens.
Definitely. Never did like that Chuck E. Cheese or otherwise. And then finally, we're going to jump to 2 minutes to midnight. And we have a variety of coverage this week about how close we are to the bubble bursting, not bursting. Something's going to happen. Tell you that much.
All right. First, let's talk about the latest Claude Code functionality for channels.
Yeah. So this one kind of snuck in. And frankly, I wouldn't have seen it if it hadn't made it to Hacker News over the past week. But they've apparently added a feature to Claude Code where you can connect it to a variety of plugins. So there's a whole series now of like official plugins, but you can also create your own that exist in like the Claude plugin store. And those plugins do things like allowing you to intercept the messages between the console and your input to the console and route them to stuff like, I guess a good example would be Telegram. But they also, I looked at the channels thing, they have support for Slack and a whole bunch of other ones too. Discord, I guess iMessage if you're running on a yeah. So it's pretty neat. And this gets us, I was wondering, I guess when we covered the NVIDIA news last week about the OpenClaw sort of like fork that they've made. And I was wondering when a big name kind of provider was gonna tackle this, and it seems like Claude has chosen an interesting middle ground where they're not going full OpenClaw on us, but they're allowing you to take to the streets, if you will, with Claude Code in a little bit more dynamic way. And then not really covered by this, but also worth mentioning is they also just announced like remote support for Claude Code via Claude Desktop and Cowork too.
Yep.
So not surprising timing given this coming out too, but they're definitely realizing that folks are using this on their phones, and you can still be fairly productive when you're out and about by answering questions on the go.
The other thing that they also have released is running prompts on the schedule. In fact, you can see it if you're looking at this in the video version. There is a tab there for running prompts on the
next
schedule.
Link down after channels.
Yes, scheduling task, and then having this channels capability where their quick start demo is basically like a chat front end for Claude Code, right? Kind of similar to what OpenClaw has with that initial setup. I think all they're missing is maybe Heartbeat, and they at least have all the major pieces.
OpenClaw. Yeah.
I've always been impressed with how quickly the Anthropic team is able to, once the community shakes out some best practice, it just gets rapidly
swallowed into Claude.
Yeah.
In short order.
Yeah. Maybe the only thing that matters is that general model and the general model capabilities, because any workflow things, it's trivial to copy.
Not much of a moat these days.
Yeah, that's true. Rahul, do you have anything to mention about this?
Have you used
A good
channels
way
yet?
to get more context into Claude. They
Cut that
have
part out.
use cases like, if you're debugging things and everything, you can push messages directly into your existing session. So I think that was the missing piece, and it does help.
Yeah, and they did talk about the security aspect, because one of the things that OpenClaw is rather weak at is security, to say the least. It doesn't seem like this feature is that much of an improvement. There's some access control,
Although
but
I
think
was going to say, I just saw another piece this week that I thought was interesting around that. Remember when we were talking about like having that proxy set up where essentially the LLM doesn't know the credentials. It just knows the proxy credentials, and then the proxy actually fills it in. Someone built it.
Nice.
Unsurprisingly using LLMs. But so I saw that on HN also the other day, and I was like, oh, cool.
yeah, that's cool. As long as
I haven't had time to play with it yet. I just saw it, but I'm excited to maybe give that a whirl with something like this, and then like get a little bit closer to a safer OpenClaw.
yeah, and then finally we can use OpenClaw without with wild abandon.
Without yellowing your credentials onto the internet.
Here's all my personal information. Well, I've got a news article blog post from Simon Williamson's blog this week. He was wondering about the same problem that we've been talking about, which is when LLMs, L.M. DOS are trained.
Lowercase s.
Lowercase s, yes, are trained on specific technologies as a part of their training data. Like, A, how do they work with less seen languages and frameworks? And B, what would happen to the development of new tools and new frameworks? Or will technology kind of be frozen in place? This article is about the first half of that question, which is, in his experience, once you have given the new tool with sufficient wrapping, sufficient documentation, he did not experience any degradation in the model's ability to use those tools. So the models are generalizable enough to learn to use new libraries on the fly. And in fact, he, as a corollary to this, he talked about how a lot of companies have already started releasing skills targeting their specific libraries and tools. So I think this is going to become almost a first-class product from these platform or software players. Is like, not only do you have DX products, now you have AI. AX, something like that. Agent experience tooling that'll be created. It doesn't answer our second question of like, how does your new library become popular if it's good enough? But I guess if you provide good agentic tooling around the library and more agents are using it, then it will eventually be swallowed by.
But I also think that like tooling and skills is only part of the battle, because that's more for folks that sort of know what they're doing, right? Or like fall onto the engineering end of the spectrum. But what about like I know that the other thing that's been kind of going on that's funny is like we talked about this a couple of weeks ago about the idea of the lines blurring between product and engineering and even UX to some degree. And I actually just started experiencing that in my professional life this week, which again, I'm used to it being blurry, but I'd never really, because I guess I work in those blurry areas, but I'd never really seen people really just stepping up to like and do engineering tasks that didn't have like formal background in it. And I was starting to see that happen, which has been pretty interesting. But the biggest thing I took away from that is Claude is only as powerful as, to some degree, your ability to ask it questions, right? So if you're really lost as to what's going on, you're going to have a hard time in the modern ecosystem just because of how it is. So that makes me wonder, in like pulling it back to what we're talking about, if someone of that skill level is approaching it, what would they encounter doing this, right? I think it would probably just reach for the stuff that it really knows baked into the model. So I don't know. Interesting to think about.
Agentic discovery, right? There's going to be a corresponding piece or maybe an extension of SEO. And I think there's a name for it. It's like GEO or AEO of like how do you trick the or optimize the
EIO
agent to use it as default. So
it's in that link you have right there, the first update, what Claude Code actually chooses. That link is along those lines where they ran the study.
Yep.
And it's choosing GitHub Actions, Stripe, and it's using Vercel for deploy almost all the time. And that gives, these companies such a big advantage over it chose AWS, GCP, and all that none of the times as the default deployment layers. So yeah, and people are now like building skills and everything too. I think Simon calls it out later. I think that is towards that. If you have an easier skill available, then the model might, use it. But if you don't, then good luck.
Right, but that requires you to know about the skill and install the skill.
Yeah.
But the discovery piece is kind of broken if the user is a designer. Like they're just going to go with, they may have feelings about Figma versus Photoshop, but they're not going to have strong feelings about Vercel versus,
Yeah.
But thankfully, designers are hopefully not making decisions about where to deploy their company's product, at least.
You never know. Be interesting to see.
The jobs are all merging, I hear. So
yeah.
We don't know.
Soon there will just be employee and then a GUID.
And then eventually the employee gets laid off.
And then there's only a GUID.
A GUID, yeah.
Because the model trained on everything you could do. So now it's like virtual GUID of employee 1217 AFT. Yeah.
Isn't that what your Slack handle when sometimes it doesn't render the actual display? It just like you and then some numbers and characters. That's what we become.
All right, Dan. Next up, we have a TechCrunch article from Dan.
Yeah. So apparently, Meta has had a security incident, which they categorized as a Sev 1. I'm assuming that they do Sevs like pretty much everyone else does. So it's from 1 to some other number. So that seems pretty serious.
Oh, possibly 0.
What?
It could start with Sev
0.
Yeah,
it could be 0. True. Yeah. Sorry, I guess I was thinking that mentally, but didn't say it out loud. So yes. And apparently, the incident led to massive, quote unquote, amounts of company and user related data becoming available to engineers who were not otherwise authorized to access it for 2 hours. So kind of a big oopsie on the auth side that supposedly was caused by a employee asking on an internal forum for help with a technical question. And then they asked an AI agent to analyze the question, and the agent posted a response without asking the engineer for permission to share it. So maybe it basically just leaked credentials or something that it shouldn't have. Yeah.
Right.
Kind of an interesting thing regardless, because now we've had an AWS production incident caused by an agent, and then now this. So not saying it's good or bad, just saying this is the new reality that I think we need to start coming to terms with as software engineers. Is how do we defend against this kind of stuff and like keep quality high despite, using these tools. So
right. So like whose fault is it, right? Is it the person who asked the question without reading the solution and thinking through the solution thoroughly? Or is it the person who used an AI to generate the answer? Or is it Meta for not having enough checking systems in place to make sure the code is correct? Is it
presumably
the
agent shouldn't have had, assuming it is a leaked credential, which is kind of how I read it. I haven't read the original article that the TechCrunch article is based on, because I unfortunately don't subscribe to the information, but they sort of implied it was a credential leak, which also begs the question, why did the agent have access to credentials, right? If that is in fact the case.
Yeah, I read it as the agent recommended a code modification, and the code modification is
really
what
caused the problem.
Credential. That's the way I took it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, how much can we trust our agents? And
oh, I see. You're right. Yeah, I missed that part. So the original asker of the question took actions based on the agent's guidance, which then caused the leak. Okay. You're right. I did misread that. So
right. So everybody trusting the agent a little too much. I think it's a problem here.
It's an interesting topic. A lot of that these days.
Yeah, I think this is almost like the next step in the process evolution. Like once we have moved towards this, nobody is really reviewing the code / have the bandwidth to really understand the problem and just relying on the agents too much. Then what checks do you need to build around that agent usage to make sure this kind of incident doesn't happen again?
Mhm.
We'll probably be
The
talking more about that.
It makes me think of the Goodhart's law we were talking about, I think last week. Like
Mhm.
at the end of the day, and every time this happens, that's when I'm like, there can't be a better proof that this is not anywhere close to humans or it's not general enough yet. Because
All right.
at the end of the day, the models are optimized for seeking the reward function. If you say, help me solve this problem, we see these examples all the time. Yeah, I'm going to skip permissions and I'm going to do all these things to get you what you need. And so that's going to keep happening. And then the other thing, who's responsible? There's that piece. There's also, we worry about how hackers are going to get a lot of easy game with all this wipe coded stuff. On the other hand, they might not have to do anything. We might just give away everything we have
Just
access to by just like, why do you even need to work and, commit any crimes to get into our systems? We'll just publish all this publicly.
hacking
So
in 2026, just sitting there and paying attention.
just sit around and keep an eye on public forums and you'll get something.
Being able to use a security search engine.
The golden age of
Subscribe to
cyber
Facebook
crimes.
forum. Yeah.
I mean, look, there was plenty of times where that was the case before LLMs too. Like,
Yeah.
what was that really astonishing one where like all the webcams were publicly exposed or something, and all you had to do was search for a certain string on Shodan or whatever, and it would But yeah, probably more of that to come, right?
No, absolutely. It's gonna be a while until we figure out all the tooling that are needed around
It's
around
the
this problem.
moat book prophecy. We coined
love
it
it.
here first, friends.
Meta does have,
That's
isn't everybody required? There is almost a strict requirement to use AI in your development and whatever. So you
Maybe.
almost
I know some companies have done that. I'm not sure if Meta's one of them.
yeah. You almost
Mine-
need like a counter metric of like use AI, but how many sell whatever's you caused, and that feeds into
As a result of using it, yeah.
Yeah, because if you just optimize for use AI, you might not get what you're looking for. So you need some other ways to
True.
measure things.
yeah.
Yes, that is true. I know of someone that created extremely elaborate ASCII art with Claude to meet some token metrics. Was not me, but apparently works
How
really well.
else do you brag that you're a 10x
That was not a
engineer? You have to
confession.
show your
Yes.
token consumption.
All right. On this week's post-processing, we have an article brought to us by Rahul about what 81,000 people want from AI from Anthropic.
From Anthropic using, it says right there, their AI interviewer. This is something they had introduced, I think, late last year. So this is not people talking to a real human. This is people talking to an LLM interviewer that collected all of this data. So that was also interesting at such a massive scale, these interviews happening using an LLM interviewer. There were a few different things that stood out to me, like people want a lot of the things that like people want from AI were all very personal to them. They want to get better at their jobs. They want to transform themselves into whatever they want in their careers, and then also being able to manage their life. There's a very fun code, let me see if I can find the right section for you, where they ask about where AI has delivered on their vision, and then one of them is, if you search for that, and then the second one there is AI hasn't delivered. And then there's a code from someone in Germany saying AI should be cleaning windows and emptying the dishwasher so I can paint and write poetry. Right now, it's exactly the other way around.
They're not wrong.
So yeah, it's taking all the fun parts we want and it's taking on the fun parts. And yeah, we still have to clean and do dishes and do all these things. It very much resonated.
But according to some people, that's on purpose too, right?
How so?
That it's all, I mean, this is like sort of fringy stuff, I guess I would argue, but like people saying that stuff like CEOs want to get rid of all the employees and 100% replace them with AI. Maybe that part's a little bit less fringy, but in some cases, people go as far as saying, oh, they want to get rid of the people themselves around that too. But
I wonder about that from time to time. Yeah, this is the conspiracy corner here, but it's possible.
The like Silicon Valley wants to like technocracy or what, I don't know, whatever. Yeah.
1 minute they want us to have more babies so we can increase the workforce. The next minute they want to get rid of us all.
Yeah, that just goes to show no one knows what they're doing or what they want out of life.
That's probably closer to the truth, yes.
And if they do know, AI hasn't delivered on it.
Yeah. Some like touching pieces from this were, people in Ukraine who are in bomb shelters and they're dealing with grief and people dying around them. And they used Claude for emotional support. And so that was very touching. And other people lost loved ones and stuff. They feel more comfortable talking to it because it's more, this kind of goes into the whole sycophancy thing you were looking into, Shimin. But partly it's like, patient and doesn't show any judgment. And even when maybe it is judging them, it's mostly like passing positive judgment. This is right and I agree with you and all that. But sometimes in times of grief to process that's what you need. And then there was one concept that was really good in this called light and shade. There's a whole section about that later. What people want from AI and what they fear from it are both kind of like the two sides of the same coin, is what the interviewers found. And so, some people might be like, we use it for emotional support, but the example that I just gave, but then also like they're afraid that they're going to become dependent on that. And then you lose the real human connection and you're relying more and more on AI for all these things because of all the benefits that they're getting from it. Or teachers are saying they see their students, they can see a cognitive decline in their students already. And I'm like, but is this AI or is this just a kids these days argument of back in my day, everybody was much more prepared than kids these days. So people are seeing the benefit and harm sometimes are like two sides of the same coin to them. Yeah, that's all I got from this one.
Yeah, I agree with you on the most interesting thing here is the light and shade comparison, right? On the one hand, you literally have a tutor that knows everything there is to know about a single subject, and it can tutor you with more patience than certainly me or you. But on the other hand, if we don't use it correctly and lose that learning friction, then you aren't actually learning anything. I also, part of me, this piece is obviously going to, not to necessarily throw shade at it, but coming from Anthropic, you're going to expect this piece to take on a more pro-AI approach. But I find it to be fairly balanced overall. And it did give enough space for the skepticism and the downsides of over-reliance on AI. But overall, I don't know. I went back to see how folks felt about other technological advances throughout time, like major technological advances. And Dan knows this. I'm about to crow Socrates, Dan. Plato wrote in his dialogue, Phaedrus, Socrates doesn't like writing as a piece of technology. Here, and I quote, Phaedrus, writing shares a strange feature with painting. The offsprings of painting stands there as if they are alive, but if anyone asks them anything, they remain mostly solemnly silent. The same is true of written words. And then I went back to look for how folks reacted to tractors when tractors were introduced to replace horses.
Okay.
And here I have a quote from a Nebraskan farmer about tractors. Quote, how do tractors compare with horses on wet ground? Tractors usually depreciate in value in proportion to the amount of work they do, while horses usually increase in value. Horses are money makers and they will do the work too if you will give them time and feed. Horses get their strength and power from feed raised on the farm, while tractors' power is from a fluid called, quote, gasoline, the price of which is 25 cents a gallon and it is still rising. I think technically they are right?
Which is
like
shockingly expensive at the time. Oh, inflation.
Technically, you're right. Tractors are not as good as horses for certain things. It's certainly less independent. It is. He is right that horses can just eat what you grow on the land, whereas tractors need oil that may or may not come from the Middle East. That's transported through these very large shipping containers. So, but all that said, like we don't think about tractors, the downside of tractors, or the downside of riding anymore. And part of me wonders if the battle's already kind of lost or will be seen as lost.
The battle for AI.
The battle against the full embrace of AI.
Yeah. I mean, I guess my take on that is that, this is purely my opinion, but it's going to depend on how far we get before, and this is why I think 2 minutes to midnight is an interesting segment and why we keep it, even though it's been bouncing back and forth, is how far will we get before the bubble bursts, if it does, right? And when I say how far, I basically mean on that like exponential curve or whatever you believe the curve to be towards AGI. Whether or not we would hit something like that, I don't know, but like it kind of doesn't matter to me. What matters is if we get far enough along on the value curve that it's embedded, then yeah. But if we don't, and I think maybe arguable that we've started to hit that from like Opus 4.5 era onwards, then, and all of a sudden it gets 4 times expensive, then it's just another form of crypto, right? Where it didn't go away, crypto's still around, but nobody's really talking about it besides like the true zealots,
Right. But unlike crypto, people are actually seeing benefits from AI. I think one of the points that the article raises is that I really liked was, and I quote, nearly half of all lawyers in particular mention coming up against AI unreliability firsthand, yet they also report the highest rates of realized decision-making benefits. So yeah, so maybe it's about using it effectively.
Yeah.
You were saying crypto hasn't had its benefits? So many crooks and thieves have gotten like insanely rich off of it. Yeah.
That's true. I haven't bought any drugs on the dark web in a while. That's probably why.
Yeah. I mean, I just, there was a time period, at least in tech, where if you didn't have blockchain in the title of what you were doing, you couldn't get funding and people wouldn't talk about what you were doing, right? And so the hype cycle's there, but even more accelerated with AI. But the question is like, are we far enough along the adoption curve that if something catastrophic were to happen to say like pricing or availability of it, are we far enough along that it'll stick? Yeah, I think my gut is probably yes, at least for software developers everywhere. I don't know, but
yeah,
I don't know. Be interesting to see, and that's why we talk about it. Who knows?
It's fun to observe this firsthand,
for sure.
One last thing I have is they talk about how AI's benefit may be strongest where learning is volitional compared to within institutional structures where AI is more likely to be used as a shortcut. I found that to be quite enlightening, and it definitely checks out with my personal work, right? Like I love AI on my side projects, but if I'm being forced to use AI with a deadline and a leaderboard, which I'm starting to hear more and more about, I would fucking hate it.
What's the leaderboard do? Track number of tokens?
Yeah, like a token leaderboard.
Holy.
Which is a real thing.
So how much money are you burning is a bragging right now?
Yeah.
Save it for the rant. We'll get to it.
I'm just teasing. I'm just getting you warmed up, Dan.
It's Chekhov's token on the mantle. It's going to come flying down. Well, speaking of the next segment, Dan, why don't you tell us a little bit about VEC?
Oh, gosh.
Memory CLI.
Yeah,
Dan,
I'm kind of embarrassed
open source Lasky.
that you even brought this one in. Where do I start? Okay, so I've been using Claude for a long time and still do, I guess, and as my main tool. It's on my list, folks. I'll get there, I promise. But like a lot of people have been still telling me that I really need to check out Codex again, and I'm like, okay, it's on my list. I'll do it. But
he's just biased against OpenAI. Other than that, he'll do it. He doesn't like them.
Who isn't after the anyway?
Join our Patreon to hear what Dan really thinks about it.
Yeah. Anyway, so one of the things that's always kind of annoyed me, especially like Claude Code versus the desktop version, is like the desktop version actually did eventually get memories. We were actually talking about that a little bit in the green room before the show today about what does Claude know about you, which is kind of fun if you have memories enabled. But the reason that this came about was I got exhausted by having to tell Claude across a variety of other projects, like little sort of nitpicky coding preferences that I have. Like personally, I'd rather see like functional JavaScript/TypeScript development than like class-based, like avoid classes unless you need them. It's just a preference, but it's one that I personally have. And it would always like reach for classes without a good justification. There's certainly a time and a place for classes. Like I'm not like a purist about anything, but like it would reach for them in ways that I thought were kind of not justified. So I got annoyed with that. And, agent stuff is agent MD and everything is fine within like project folders. I don't remember. I think at the time they didn't have the global one. Maybe they did and I just didn't know how to use it. So either way, I decided that this would be a perfect opportunity to vibe code some tooling. This was born as an MCP server. And frankly, it was kind of a failure of a project. I wrote like 8 or 9 versions. I vibed, like purely vibed, didn't even read the source for it. 8 or 9 versions of it. I knew what I wanted and how I wanted it to work, which was I knew that there was like a open source vector extension for SQLite, which would allow me to do vector search. I knew that Olama had several embeddings models and like available. And so I wanted to make something that was like local to the machine and like cheap to run that would allow me to do both like a graph-based search with like JSON and embeddings-based like semantic search that would allow the agent to like sort of put things together based on like what I asked it to remember. So the MCP, I had a lot of, like the very first draft of the MCP worked, but like it kept failing when I tried to use it both at work and at home because it would just not boot the server and I couldn't figure out why for the longest time. And I think there's a couple of issues. Like first, MCP was not the most stable profile. You can go back and look at the Git history and this tell me what I did wrong too. I'm sure there's plenty of problems in it. And then the other thing I did that I thought would be neat was when SSE came out as a supported MCP protocol, I wanted to add SSE to it so I could actually run this like hosted on my home lab and then connect to it from different clouds and have it remember things across, which I thought would be kind of neat. And so that was, I think, when that trouble really started. So now, cut to, I actually deleted this project completely off of GitHub, but I still had a copy of it sitting on my Mac. And I decided like, CLI is kind of beating MCP right now, at least in my mind. And maybe I should give this project another go as a CLI. So honestly, it didn't take that long. I think the prompt was like, here's this MCP server that does vector memory, read it, look at the code, and then rewrite it as a CLI and strip out all the MCP stuff. That was about all I asked it to do. And it pretty much one-shotted it. And hey, guess what? It works and it's reliable now, which is great because you don't have to deal with any of the MCP annoyances. So not only does it actually work reliably, but it was way easier to actually convince Claude to use it. So all I did was it has an extensive help in the little runner file. And so I had Claude then in my local instance read it and write a skill for it. Yeah. So I'm using it
That
on my
just
local
works?
stuff. Yeah. It's not bad if you need to have it remember little snippets of things that aren't, necessarily worth putting in the agent file or something that's maybe not specific to the repo, but more, I don't know. You can also have it do weird stuff. Call me Charlie, and it'll try to remember to call you Charlie.
That's not creepy. You mentioned the JSON-based graph search. Like, what is the use case for that? I think the embedding makes
It's
sense.
not really, maybe your graph is going a little too far, but it can store relationships between the memories.
Okay. So then it could discover.
Yeah. So it basically at runtime, it can say this is related to that when it stores something and if it chooses to do so. So, it's up to Claude if it stores anything there. It might not even make relationships, but like you could have something like, remember my coding preferences and then like write a bunch of them. And so it could structure the memories such that coding preferences is the root. And then there's several subtopics under there. I guess you could have done the same thing with tagging, probably less complicated, but
Tagging as
whatever.
a graph, the way I see it.
Sure.
Yeah, but it could then still like traverse through the entire graph to look for a thing if it has to, right? Because that's one of the shortcomings of a vector embedding.
Yeah, exactly. I was just trying to essentially give it a couple different ways to search for the same content because semantic stuff's great, but it's not the be all end all, And I think there's also a lexical search you can do too.
Nice.
I don't know.
Is
Like I said, I
there-
didn't read the codes.
Have you tried-
Truly
have you tried
vibe-coded,
different-
folks.
Have you
If
tried
it breaks,
different
no
embedding
warranty.
schemes?
Sorry.
Have you tried different embedding schemes to see which one you prefer? Because I'm sure Ollama comes with multiple ones depending on the
I
model.
didn't, and there's actually probably newer models now too, from when I first wrote this that are maybe worth
Right.
checking out. I think I used like the smallest embedding model to download. It only at the time I wrote this too originally, which is I guess like 9 months ago or so, it only supported a handful of embedding models too. So I don't know if they've expanded what they support. And I've also since then started moving away from Ollama too, since it's basically just like a wrapper around Llama C++, and
Yeah.
the tooling around Llama C++ has gotten a lot better. So it's like you kind of don't need Ollama anymore unless you're like doing really Ollama specific stuff, like using their cloud offering or yeah.
Rahul, do you have anything to add to?
I've bored him to
Nope.
death.
Call Charlie.
Okay.
Call Daddy Charlie. That's the only
Yeah.
thing I care for.
That's all he took away from that.
Well, folks, if you're in the market for memory CLI, give Dan's
Don't.
Vec memory CLI a
Don't.
shot and report back. Write us back.
Please
Star it
don't.
and fork it. We need those numbers to go up. That's how we can
0, 0.
later,
Wow.
yeah, inject some ransomware in there. But was I not
Okay.
supposed to say that on the podcast? Sorry. That's
You
No,
do
you
your
should say
own.
everything.
just cut it out later.
That's what you're here for.
Hopefully.
That's great. Okay. Well, for the deep dive this week, we got a paper from the Wharton School of Business from
Wharton.
UPenn titled Thinking Fast, Slow, and Artificial: How AI is Reshaping Human Reasoning and the Rise of Cognitive Surrender by Stephen D. Shaw and Gideon Nave.
Mm.
The basic idea of the paper here is, I think, if you're not familiar with the book Think Fast and Slow, it's a fairly influential psychology, business / self-help book about the two kinds of thinking that humans use. The fast kind that is more intuitive, more gut-based, and then a slow one which requires more reasoning, more cognitive power. The book was written by Daniel Kahneman.
Kahneman
Back
and
in-
Amos Tversky.
There we go. This is why we have Rahul here. The other thing he does is he remembers all the names, which I'm terrible at. And here, Stephen and Gideon proposes a third mode to this bimodal thinking system, which is AI. And the idea here is that with the availability of AI, people would essentially use AI as a third mode of thinking. And a lot of times they would trust AI almost implicitly, therefore surrendering their thinking ability over to AI. And that's what they mean by AI surrender. They found that relative to baseline, without AI, accuracy significantly rose when AI was accurate and fell when it erred, which is pretty reasonable, right? Like if you trust AI a lot, then if AI is right, you're right. And if AI is wrong, you're going to be wrong. And that they call the behavior signature of a cognitive surrender. And the other interesting thing they found out was that using AI or system 3 thinking increases the confidence of the user, even when the AI is incorrect, which also makes sense to me, as if you're relying on AI, then you're going to be more confident than you otherwise would be. They have on page 12 of the paper, they have an interesting cognitive affordance and trade-off of system 3 chart, where for system 1, it's fast, it's human, it's more intuitive and associative. System 2, it's also human, it's analytical and reflective. And system 3 is artificial. It's algorithmic and statistical. If you are just thinking it in terms of, folks are surrendering their decision-making process to the AI, and it would lead to more negative performance over time, they found that given AI, cognitive surrender can reduce the negative performance effect of time pressure when AI is correct, which to me sounds like if you're under the deadline, for example, if you ship lots of tickets, you are probably much more likely to surrender your decision-making to the AI, right? Because given the time pressure, you're not taking the proper feedback and proper reflection that you otherwise would with a PR. Whereas incentives and feedback may partially attenuate the cognitive surrender. So they also talked about how the right incentives and feedback can prevent the user from this cognitive surrender behavior. Lastly, before we get to doomed, by how everyone's just going to surrender everything to AI going forward. They view the vulnerabilities of cognitive surrender to System 3 as a design and education challenge. So how can we properly support decision makers in using System 3 effectively while maintaining critical thinking and accountability when necessary? According to their research, their results suggest that giving feedback and aligning incentives may help people engage System 2 when needed without diminishing the efficacy gains provided by System 3. And I think this ties into a lot of what we already talked about, right? When you're blindly trusting a AI-generated answer in an internal meta board, when should your System 2 thinking kick in to be like, hey, would this leak data to folks that otherwise shouldn't have the data? They didn't exactly propose how they're going to do it, but I think it.
I had some different takeaways from this too, which is like the thing I thought was interesting was that you said the time pressure is helpful, I guess, in the aspect of like if the AI gets answers right, you get answers right more often. But like you could also look at that through a negative lens too, which is that it sort of forces more cognitive surrender because you just literally don't have time not to.
Yes.
Which I think there was also that HBR paper that they talked about. Really, the reason that we haven't seen sort of drastic productivity gains from AI right now, supposedly, is because like it's not basically made so everyone has to do more and more frequently, which you would think would lead to more productivity. But like, I don't know, that's the part I find odd. But it's definitely like increased the pace of things. I've felt that personally.
Yeah, this phenomenon of like AI can help us do more than ever, and all developers are feeling burnout because you feel like you need to use AI all the time and 4 agents at the same time.
I had 6 going the other day for Gastown soon.
Congrats.
But the other thing that I wonder about with this too is like, seems like, and you're better at like the sciencey side of these papers than I am, but like in their study design, did they consider the interplay between the two at all? I don't think they did, right? It looks like it was pretty much always like a question answer and then they like time boxed it.
Yeah, that was my understanding.
I feel like there's also sort of like a fourth way, which is like you're combining System 2. I mean, I guess that's sort of what they're saying is they combine System 2 and 3 thinking. But like that's what I find myself frequently doing, right? Is poking around an idea and then using an LLM as like a thought partner almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even System 1 comes in, right? Like AI can spit out a bunch of code and your gut just says this looks wrong.
Yeah, that's true. Or the approach is wrong, or yeah, like, yep. But yeah, I'm interested in that interplay and like whether or not that changes things a little bit. The other takeaway I thought was kind of interesting, the higher trust in AI of the individual predicted more surrender, and the people who enjoy like effortful, like long running System 2 thinking tended to be more resistant to the faulty AI's promises. So the other thing, did you cover that already too? Like they intentionally injected error variants in the AI using, I forget what it was. It was see if I can find it. In any case, they basically like injected the error count so they could control it to some degree and made them more error prone as part of the study. So that was, when they say error prone, that's really what they mean. It's like the buggy, right. Intentionally buggy. If you thought Claude was bad, try Claude Bug.
Right. So and this kind of goes back to my side project that I was showing the other week, Flatterproof, right? We need to have a healthy activation of System 2 when you're using AI. And that is not something that folks are born with, especially without the marketing pro AI buzz going on.
Well, not everyone's necessarily fully a System 2 or 1 thinker either, right? Like I recall a team building exercise I did one time with a team where it was rate. Basically, there's all these lines and you plot where you think you are on the line. And then it's interesting to see where your team falls. And one of the ones that was on the lines was fast versus slow thinking. So it was continuum, but like people rate it, self-assigned and everything else. But it's definitely interesting to see how people fell and how that impacted like how they prefer to work.
No, I've yet found a developer who was mostly a System 1 developer, I think. Would you will say you're mostly the System 1?
I'm mostly
developer?
fast thinker, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, it's not. Yeah,
I think it gets me in trouble, but yeah, I tend to make like quick, intuitive decisions, and then I'm open to new information.
Interesting. Yeah. Rahul, what about you? Are you a system 2 or system 1 guy?
Mostly 2. It depends on, I guess, how much you've done pattern recognition, right? How much of that same or similar problem you've solved in the past. And then if you've seen them before, system 1. If you
I am old
haven't.
as the hills, if that's what you're trying to say, Rahul.
Yeah, but Dan is older than America, which is coming up on 250 years this year.
Entire software developer.
I don't remember. It's been a long time since I read the Thinking Fast and Slow. After reading this, I was wondering, when do you decide to engage system 2? Because that's the interesting question here, right? I don't remember if they talk about it in the book. We just naturally do it based on the consequences of the decision. So it made me think of Jeff Bezos has that one-way door, two-way door way of making decisions. And so part of it is just going to be, if it's a very low stakes decision, you might just put more faith in the AI, versus if it's it's a one-way door, you would want to deliberately engage system 2, because it's very hard to go back, or even impossible.
The other thing that's interesting about that too is if you can scroll back up a little bit for folks watching on the video, but I'll speak to it as well for the podcast. So they had that table that Shimin had mentioned earlier. So it has system 1, system 2, and system 3 across the top. And then along the side, we have origin, which is like human, computer, processing speed, cognitive effort, accuracy, blah, blah, blah. The one I found interesting was justification. And that's like, what you're using to rationalize the decision or the information you had, right? So like system 1 is experiential or post hoc. System 2 is rationalized and articulated. And then system 3 is data driven, externally generated. And one of the things that they like talked about a lot in the article was like the sort of like confidence inflation thing, right? People that had access to AI, their confidence ratings on their own answers, even though over half of them were wrong, were boosted by 12 percentage points. And you can look at that, and the data-driven, externally generated is clearly, to me at least, the reason why. Because like we're sort of trained to think that external things are right, like Wikipedia or something like that. You know what I mean? Like maybe that's a bad example, but Encyclopedia Britannica, right? It's like
Grokpedia.
Everyone's grown up since they were, everyone, but certain generations of folks have grown up referencing these, tomes of knowledge that you can treat as like more or less accurate, even though there's, problems with every piece of information out there. And the way that comes right is, I think, triggers that as an instinct, right? Whereas like, I wonder what would happen if you did the same thing, but like the exact same experiment, but then change the prompt to be, you're having a conversation and you're not 100% sure about your answers. So, make sure you qualify things that you don't know really well or that you weren't able to pull out of memory. And then the responses might have been more like human, in the sense of, if you asked me something, right, I'm going to be like, well, I think it's this, but man, I'm old as the hills and I don't always remember stuff. So like,
right. And in a way, there is a little bit of that. In general psychology, folks who sound supremely confident has a higher ability to influence others. So I wonder if that is either what reinforcement learning with human feedback trains into the model, or it's just one of those shortcomings of the model where they're not very good at sounding not confident.
By the way, that meta article we were talking about earlier, and cognitive surrender by just like following the system. So maybe that's system 3 played some part in that.
Oh, and the person just blindly.
Yeah, especially if you're, that, plus like if you're moving under a lot of time pressure or something, it's very possible that,
I have definitely seen examples of that in my own experience, of people responding to someone else's question with an LLM generated answer where they clearly took what the person asked and pasted it into an O.
Ouch.
And applied zero critical thinking to it. So you could be right. It does happen.
Be careful.
I would like to charitably say that that's a time crunch driven response, but
I had a few other things to add to this. They said that offering per item incentives still didn't eliminate the pattern of surrender. And so like even when you're paid to be right or you're incentivized to be right, people still chose to defer to AI to a certain extent, which was interesting. It's almost like don't make me spend the mental energy. And closely tied to that is um the one of the things they talk about is like the need for cognition. And to simplify it, not everybody likes to think for themselves. And if you give someone who doesn't like to think for themselves a faulty, unreliable companion like AI, you might widen the gap between someone who likes to think for themselves and using that as a tool for research and then making even better decisions versus someone who's already not a big fan of thinking and then delegating even more thinking to, a flawed AI. So it's going to widen that cognitive gap there.
Yeah, that's a tremendous point. It's almost like AI will have this societal impact of making the rich richer and the poor poorer. I wonder if they should come up with a, hey, you've followed my suggestion the last 10 times without pushing back. Maybe you
Yeah.
want to give it a shot, kind of a deal.
And then what else was it? But yeah, the whole like time pressure thing and all that. Our world is moving faster. And in the back of my mind, maybe like many other Americans, have the midterms coming up. Trusting AI, which will be heavily used in these elections for sure,
Already is
going to be a big pain, especially under the world just seems to be moving faster. So I can see a combination of these things where if you don't like to think for yourself, the world is moving much faster. You're under a lot of time pressure because of the economy, jobs, blah, blah, blah. Things would get in certain
Who
directions.
should I vote for, Rahul / Claude?
Well, Charlie.
And one final thing before we move on, the Tversky guy had influenced Kahneman's book, but he wasn't an author on the book because he had died before it. So I would like to correct my false statement, unlike some AIs out there who speak confidently.
Thank you for looking that up.
They were longtime collaborators and anyways, yeah.
All right. Well, with that correction, that live correction, let's move on to my favorite segment of the show.
I don't want someone writing to you and be like, "This guy is also lying." While you guys are
just
talking
assume
about
you're using an LLM
with confidence. No, I did. I had confidence built into me before LLMs. Now I'm just,
you just sound extra confident all the time. This is how you make it in life. All right, let's get to Dan's rant.
Dan's rant.
So this is an unusual Dan's rant because it's a rant specifically. Well, it's not even about this article, but it's about an article in general, or at least the concepts that are talked about in it. So TechCrunch on 21st of March here ran an article that was called, "Are AI tokens the new signing bonus or just the cost of doing business?" And like that question, the fact that we're even posing that question is wild to me. And so I'll just quote the section of the article and then I can rant about it. So the idea is straightforward enough. Rather than giving engineers only salary, equity, and bonuses, companies should also hand them a budget of AI tokens, the computational units that power tools like Claude, ChatGPT, and Gemini. Spend them to run agents, automate tasks, crank through code. The pitch is that access to more compute makes engineers more productive, and that more productive engineers are worth more. It's an investment in the person holding them, is the idea. And I'm just like, what? But how is that a benefit? How is that a perk for the employee?
If you look through a very fine hole, Dan, these are all perks. None of these are meant to.
I mean, look, if I had two offers that were identical in every respect, except one was like you get a Claude like $20 subscription and the other one is you get a Claude $200 subscription or something. Yeah. And they were both really cool. All other things were completely equal. Sure, I could see that maybe. But like as a signing bonus, I don't like the incentives are just drastically incorrect here. Like that's not a benefit to me. Yeah. It's a benefit to the employer because what they're paying for is my reasoning ability and like just general thinking and instructing the computer what to do in the first place. Whether that's writing code or prompting an LLM is kind of irrelevant, other than like possibly velocity, right? So like if you're hiring me for that ability, what does the token budget give me? It gives you something about my output, but not me. I don't know. I found this whole idea to be like incredibly offensive and just wild, which I mean, I guess that, that's why I was like, the leaderboard thing will come back with this, right? Because like there are companies that are doing leaderboards around spend, which is like, I understand that through the lens of you want to, like, nobody's really sure how to pitch this in an organization, right? And I think we're seeing sort of native adoption through people like ourselves that are curious about it, and then they start poking around it, and then they realize the potential and, really start going with it. And then other people see what they're doing and it can kind of spread a little bit virally. And I think there's another group of people that were kind of like more skeptical. And then the models, the last 2 sets of models really have like truly been a step change, and now they're more on board. And there's a couple different like narrative threads that are going here, but like tokens as a bonus for me, can I use them for whatever I want? Like, cause like maybe if that was true for like, here's a bucket that you can use outside of work, like that's a bonus for me, right? In the way that like I can take a cash bonus and spend it on whatever. But I just that's the part that I really get, is like, how is that an incentive to I don't know. Tell me more about the narrow lens. Like what
I see these as tools, and you should want to give the best tools to all your employees.
I agree, but
Yeah.
would you go to like, okay, so let me pose the hypothetical to you, Rahul. So we've got company A, and they're going to offer you, I don't know, X salary and Y, options or stock or whatever.
Mhm.
And then there's company B, and they offer you X and Y exactly the same, right?
Mhm.
Company A gives you an old busted Windows machine, and company B gives you the latest MacBook Pro. Are you going to choose like purely because of that?
No, it depends on like what the company's doing and all that.
Right. That's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. It's like, how is that a benefit to you? I mean,
Yeah.
certainly I've got preferences around operating systems and blah, 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 but like,
Sure, but depending on X and Y, I can buy my own machine, even if they give me a busted Windows one. That's not a big problem.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, how?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to take
Good.
another analogy, like I will certainly prefer if the company I'm working for has legacy code base in Ruby over PHP.
Yep.
But you're not gonna gaslight me into thinking that the Ruby code base is a part of my compensation package, right?
Yeah.
Like that's not how this works. Give me United States dollar or NFTs or stablecoins or anything that I can use to exchange for tokens. That's what the economy is about.
Yeah, I just, I don't like the value setup here is not nonsensical to me. It doesn't make any sense for posting this article. So apologies to the author, but I'm just like, what? And then I've seen it kind of, bandying about in a couple places, and I'm just like, you've got to be kidding me. Because anyway, it was a rant,
What
pure
was
and simple.
the oh yeah, Jensen Huang had that, right? That engineers should receive roughly half their base salary again in tokens.
Yeah, but him saying that he means it in the sense of like he didn't say that in the sense of like you need to do that that's not compensation to the engineer. Oh, he did. He said it's a recruiting tool.
Yeah.
Good Lord. I thought that was just like using it as an approximation for token budget, but no.
Why might someone who has nothing to do with tokens or the AI industry be pitching ideas like these of spending $200 per person in token consumption? I have no idea.
Yeah. Wild times. And I have a feeling Jensen will be making a comeback. Let's move on then to our 2 minutes to midnight segment, where every week we discuss where we are on the AI bubble using the analogy from the atomic clock from the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. I believe we are at 1 minute and 45 seconds still from last week, where we didn't change anything. So let's see how we feel this week.
Bucking the trend, no changes. Yeah, so speaking of Jensen, he made a pretty shocking announcement in addition to the token announcement that I was just upset about. But he also claims that, or doesn't claim, he put the projected sales for Blackwell and I guess Vera Rubin into the $1 trillion, which is pretty crazy. I mean, it's like you can't get more hype than that, I don't think. So they saw quote unquote 500 billion demand for Blackwell chips through 2026. But the thing about it that gets me a little bit too, sorry, I'm still kind of in rant mode. I can't shut it off that easy. Is that like demand isn't the same thing as sold, because the bottleneck here is and always has been like TSMC's ability to like ship this stuff, since they're fabless. So I don't know. It's like, it's cool to say that you've got this demand, but that demand is also like on paper and isn't necessarily going to result in, well, I mean, clearly it will result in revenue for them, but like, if you can't meet the demand, like, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if we had analogies from the dot-com bubble for these kind of just bananas numbers. It's like Dr. Evil, $1 billion, but 1 trillion.
It is going to be, because these are the ones that are optimized for inference versus training, right? And I think this kind of fits into there's been a narrative that training plateaued sometime late last year or whatever. And because we haven't seen a major, a Claude 5 or a GPT-6, we've been seeing minor improvements and optimizations. And I think the plan here is in actually deploying all these models and driving down inference costs is where the next big opportunity is and where the money is going to come from. I think that's what he's aligning with and betting on. If from that angle, it makes sense to me. How much it sells, whatnot, I don't know. You got to keep,
Yeah, I'm not saying
excited.
that the demand doesn't align with things that are happening. It's a pretty wild number to throw out there when you're throwing it out there knowing damn well that you can't produce $1 trillion worth of chips.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe the Terafab. Did Terafab not make it to the links this week? Maybe the Terafab will start cranking them out tomorrow.
Maybe.
Yeah. Rahul, your link this week is accelerated FOMO in the age of AI.
Oh, yeah. So this is from Sid, and I do not know their last name, but if you go to their homepage, it says also known as Tony S. Shrug. we're off to a great start there already. I love Tony S. already. But this is their rant on there's this very FOMO driven narrative that's happening where it's like, you have to be burning X amount of tokens. If you're not running N number of agents in your sleep, you're not going to make it. We're seeing all these, like, it should be part of your compensation. There was this like, Tyler Cowen had this logic, thing of, if you think this is the last big time opportunity to make money, you should be working as hard as possible. And if it's not, it's still very like significantly improve your capability, and you should be working hard to learn it, something along those lines. And so there's a lot of this, like, this might be the, the now or never time, and you don't want to miss out on this. And Sid/Tony S gets into, who's pushing these things. Tyler Cowen, to his credit, is not pushing any of these. It was just interesting that he had posted that. But back to this post, people were trying to sell you courses, were trying to sell you the hustle culture of, how less you sleep, how many agents you run. The kryptonite to all of that bragging is what actually have you, built or shipped that has actually had some value at the end of the day. And that mostly like ends the conversation right there. The second one is sell courses, which goes back to our like $1,000 a month prompt pack business. It's one way to sell courses. And then the last couple of sentences in this section were interesting. Last sentence, the new adage about like gold rushes and shows should be, during a gold rush, sell courses on how to sell show. He's laughing.
That was. I said, speaking of, we're happy to announce our newest venture on the podcast.
And then just like some people who work at like the big labs and who work at these AI companies, that when he goes about like your paychecks and RSUs depend directly on AI, so it is predictable that you'll do these things. And just from like when I was reading that, from a cognitive dissonance perspective, it would be very hard to live with the fact that you don't believe in something but you're spending your day in and day out on that. And so
yeah.
you can try very hard, but at some point the brain's just going to take over and be like, we believe in this, go back to crypto NFT analogies or any of them. Sometimes your brain just makes you believe in things for reasons you can't really control. So anyways, their call is, this technology is much more useful than Sidra's, calls back to the NFT era where people were just running crazy for some online media. And it talks about like maybe we can tone the toxic cheerleading down a little bit. So hit all the right notes. The courses thing made me laugh because we should definitely be doing that. Sell courses on Selection.
Oh, no.
Exclusive membership club for the podcast, of course. We get one-on-one coaching from Dan and his.
In other news, this will be my last episode. Even though I
honest, I don't know if you guys see this. I end up seeing this on Substack a decent amount because a lot of these links we end up picking up and through like other reading. Substack is, much more prominent now. But every other post or every third post is like, my setup did XYZ, my other thing did this XYZ. You're not gonna make it if you don't have these other things. By the way, I have a product to sell, or I'm doing a class that does these. And it's just like, it's all, if you just talk to the AI long enough and know what you want, it'll help you get that. There's nothing actually special here, but the course sellers are there at large and they're selling hard.
Well, they're taking the prompt pack advice seriously. They're implementing it on their Substack is what they're doing.
I mean, what else are you going to do with those bonus tokens you got when you got hired,
So we have NVIDIA with $1 trillion demand. We have what's clear to be bubbles around the marketing aspect of AI. And I have a little bit of a downer this week, which is OpenAI shutters Sora, its video generator, after just 6 months. So I'm not sure we covered this, but OpenAI created the Sora app, social media via generative AI app. It was a huge deal when it first came out. It was #1 on the App Store, and they almost inked the deal, or they did ink the deal with Disney for Disney to provide them with $1 billion investment and allowed OpenAI to use some of the Disney characters like the Marvel superheroes and Mickey Mouse and all that. And today it came out that OpenAI is shutting the door on Sora, not just the app, but also its API service. Sounds like they're exiting the AI video generation market entirely, which I think is either because it's too expensive or it's because they want to focus everything on their current competition with Anthropic in the enterprise space.
Yeah.
But even if the second hypothesis is true, it does not make much sense to me that they would, shut down one of their rather flagship apps. So I don't take that as a good sign.
I was like, trouble.
Yeah, I think they're trying to, isn't this the year they're trying to also like focus hard on the IPO? And so you have to, anything that's not going to look good on the books, my guess is all going to be, paused, shut down.
Yeah.
And and they're trying to consolidate everything into, I think, ChatGPT, Codex, and I forget whatever the third thing was. A bunch of these get combined into a super app to like become similar to what Claude Code is trying to do. So it seems like with that, this is consistent and just another step towards prepping for IPO, from what I can tell.
And it also, like, it says they're shutting down API, but did it mention if it's getting shut down in like ChatGPT? Because there's integration there too, right? I think similar to like how Gemini can do.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. It's possible that the API is getting shut down because they aren't actually making any money via the API. It may just be really expensive to run.
I also wonder if C dance and how crazy that was also made them be like, we don't need to do this. And
They've clearly lost the battle on that one. Yeah.
yeah, let's just focus on the other things because they've been spread so thin between all these things. They haven't done anything well. They've done everything.
Yeah. More CCP propaganda for me. I'm here for it.
Yeah. By the way, I looked this up according to Gemini, so I'll start with that considering our paper about System 3. OpenAI had announced the partnership with Disney on December 11 for last year. So we're about 3 months and 2 weeks later, I think, or 4 months. And that 3-year partnership ended in about 4 months. So just saying, keep an eye out on those partnership announcements, all these other freaking things.
It's true.
That's the reason why Nick doesn't try Codex, is what I'm trying to say. Maybe by the time he signs up, it won't be a thing.
Oh no, I better go fast.
Yeah, it doesn't make much sense to me, given that a investment and integration and IP rights to some of the world's most valuable IPs is something that you would just shut down overnight. Like something feels iffy.
Yeah.
Okay. All that said, how do we feel about the clock this week?
Honestly, this last one makes me want to push it closer because, I mean, you might be right, Rahul, that it's, divesting of non-profitable things, but it's just such that and plus advertising and all the other things they've been doing have been like such a bad look, at least from the outside looking in. I'm just like, is the government contract enough and maybe an IPO enough to save them?
Is there a government contract? We haven't followed them.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I don't know. I mean, we talked about it, and then, that thread has kind of drifted a little bit on Threadmill.
Yeah, and the IPO might be when this whole house of cards come down. Also mean, this is a house of cards.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I'll float a number. I would say I would go as low as a minute.
Whoa.
Oh, wow. Aggressive. I was going to go like a minute 15. I can do like a minute 10.
Whatever you guys pick.
We could do 15.
Minute 15? Or, okay. Minute 15 it is. All right, moving the clock.
Relatedly, but didn't make the cut on these, there was also an interesting article where they went into the economics of building a data center in space. And unsurprisingly, at least to me, the economics are largely driven by the costs per ton of lift vehicles, right?
What?
And in order for a data center to be viable in space, cost per ton needs to be under $2,000, I think, or something like that. Maybe I assume it was in thousands. And currently it's, I think, double or triple that. Gang, waiting for that space data
Starships are going
center.
to take care of that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. They're going IPO this year too, aren't they?
By the way, on the
sure has no relationship to that announcement.
Yeah, and the data centers in space thing, even if it doesn't work out, there are some technical problems you'll have to solve that would be good on Earth as well. Like heat exchange, I think, is a big challenge, and if you can solve that, it would benefit us here on Earth as well. So hopefully, some good comes out of that, even if it doesn't ever end up in space.
Yeah.
And then the people who where's my water? And the data center is drinking all my water. Maybe we'll calm them down finally.
We'll save that for our space podcast called Artificial Space Nerds who don't know what they're talking about. Minute 15 it is. And that is a wrap. Thank you for joining us today for our chat. And if you like the show, if you learned something new, please share the show with a friend. You can also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps people to discover the show, and we really appreciate it. If you have a segment idea, a question for us, or a topic you want us to cover, shoot us an email at humans@adipod.ai. We'd love to hear from you. You can find the full show notes, transcripts, and Dan's CLI tool.
Oh, God.
Mentioned.
Don't use it. Just please.
www.adipod.ai. Thank you again for listening. I will catch you next week.
Cheers.
Bye.
See you, folks.